Welcome, everybody. My name is Ali McManus, and I'm a professor in the School of Health and Exercise Sciences at the University of British Columbia in the Okanagan. First of all, I'd just like to start by a land acknowledgement. I'd like to respectfully acknowledge that UBC is situated on the traditional, ancestral and unceded territory of the Sioux Okanagan Nation. And I'd also like to acknowledge that many of you are joining us from other places near and far, and acknowledge the traditional owners and caretakers of those lands too. So welcome to the 10th annual Okanagan Embrace Aging Month, and thank you so much all of you for joining us today. Embrace Aging is hosted by the Institute of Healthy Living and Chronic Disease Prevention at UBCO, Interior Savings Credit Union, and Interior Health. So UBC has joined a global network of age-friendly universities, and it formalized its pledge to make UBCO more accessible, intergenerational, and committed to research programs that are informed by the needs of an aging society. So if any of you would like to know more about the Age-Friendly University Initiative, maybe you have questions for us or would like to get involved, you can contact us through the Aging in Place Research Cluster. You can Google Aging in Place UBCO, and I will type into the chat the email and the web address for you. Embrace Aging Month was launched 10 years ago, and it was launched to celebrate and raise awareness about positive aging, and once again has organised a number of educational opportunities and events during this month of March. The sessions are designed for everyone, young and old alike, and they focus on a variety of topics related to healthy aging and ways to improve quality of life among seniors and their family caregivers. So our goal is to inspire everyone to embrace positive aging. So as you've seen in the chat room, there is closed captioning for those of you who wish to use closed captioning, and that if you have questions during the talk, please do type those into the chat forum, and we're going to read those out at the end of the presentation. So today's session is Embrace Technology for a Physically Active Lifestyle Anywhere. And our speaker is a PhD student at the University of British Columbia in the Okanagan, Jonathan Lowe. Jonathan is a PhD student in the School of Health and Exercise Sciences, and he has been funded by a joint country Canadian UK CIHR MRC project focusing on type 2 diabetes. So welcome, Jonathan, and I'm going to hand over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. McManus. And it's a pleasure for me to be here with all of you and to be able to give this talk on something that I'm extremely passionate about, which is living a physically active lifestyle and living a healthy lifestyle. And hopefully over the course of the next 30-40 minutes, we'll be able to learn together, and hopefully something that I say might help you change the way that you're living or change your practice. I know that there is a large spectrum of individuals that I think are attending, from students to family members of mine to practitioners. So I've tried to gear the talk so that hopefully everybody can take something out of it as we go through and learn together. So if I were to summarize kind of my objective for today, I would say that hopefully by the end of today, you will be able to or feel motivated to make maybe one small change to better your health or to improve your practice if you're a healthcare practitioner. And so the way that I'm going to achieve that is by explaining a little bit about technology, explaining a little bit about exercise and physical activity, and then explaining a little bit about aging. And hopefully the intersection of the three of these topics will come together nicely throughout this talk, and you'll be able to learn and hopefully, like I said, feel motivated to make even just one small change to your life. And so I'll begin by kind of explaining and talking about these two things, and then I'll finish off with talking a little bit about how my PhD research and this project that has been so generously funded by CIHR and MRC aims to try and solve or help solve this some problems that we'll talk through today. So I want to start by having us think back just thousands and thousands of years and think about our ancient ancestors who were, for the most part, hunters and gatherers. And we know that as hunters and gatherers, one of the biggest problems that our ancestors had was to try and chase down and catch their food. And so to be able to do that, they needed to try and expend as little energy as possible. They needed to save their energy for when they needed to move around from place to place, but also to chase down their food. Now, if we fast forward to today and think about that in our modern world, we unfortunately expend as little energy as possible, full stop. That's where it ends. Unfortunately, we don't have to run and chase our food and expend energy. And so the idea of moving our bodies really has, in some senses, been engineered out of our lives. So if we think about this, especially in a post-COVID world, where we can order food 24 hours a day that'll come right to our door. We can skip the dishes. We can talk to our Google Homes that'll turn on our TV. We don't even need to get off of our couch to see who's at our door. We can look at an app on our phone. There's very many ways that, in a sense, physical activity has been engineered out of our lives. We don't necessarily need to move for a lot of things, which has caused a lot of problems in terms of metabolic disease and comorbidities that we see in chronic diseases. So thinking about this pandemic that we have emerged from, arguably, we see that estimates are showing that physical activity is decreased by about 50 to 60% during COVID, which is quite substantial. And so if you think about that and how that applies to your own life, or again, if you're a health practitioner, how that might apply to your patients, take a second and think about what activities or what has been done in your life that has essentially engineered physical activity out. Do you take the escalator? Do you take the elevator? Do you skip the dishes? I am guilty of this. I threw my daughter in the car last night and we drove 3 blocks to go eat ice cream. And so I'm guilty of this, and I think that it's something that's common. And so we'll talk about hopefully how we can counteract that. So just as technology has maybe helped us engineer physical activity out of our lives, I think on the flip side, if we think of the yin-yang principle, technology can also help us engineer physical activity into our lives. And so if you think about that, and evidence has emerged that has showed us that technology and health technology can really help improve the lives of individuals with a success rate of about 75% in having positive outcomes after implementing different types of persuasive health technology. So if you think about that and think about the 21st century that we're in, and look at all of these technologies that we use, and again, if you're a practitioner, maybe you can think of through some technologies that you use in your practice. Similarly, if you're an individual who's just trying to be as healthy as you can, maybe some of these will look familiar to you. And this is not a comprehensive list or pictures of what is available, but certainly we know that technology is very prevalent in our lives, and so it's important that we learn how to use it and use it properly. So now think about for a minute, taking into account this idea of physical activity, and so you thought about how we've engineered, or you may have engineered physical activity out of your life. So now think on the flip side, how might have you engineered physical activity into your life? Or if you haven't, how could you? And I think that as you consider your own situations, then maybe you might be able to pick out and think, okay, how might I be able to change? Or going back to the objective for today, how might you be able to make just one simple change in your own life to become more healthy, or in that of your practice? So I've presented a problem and I've also presented a solution. And both of that seems to draw us to technology. So the problem of technology is that as you can see here, that we could easily avoid physical activity by delivery services, click and collect, escalators, different things like that. But at the same time, the technology can also be used to help us to improve our lives and to become more healthy through different things that we can quantify ourselves, and we can take part in these different types of activities. And one thing that technology helps us do is, you may have heard of a movement called the self-quantification movement. And the self-quantification movement is this idea that with technology, we're able to quantify a lot more the activities that we do in our everyday lives. So things like running. I can now quantify how far I run. I can quantify the pace that I run. I can quantify what my heart rate is at. I can quantify my steps. I can quantify my screen time. With technology, our life can easily become numbers, which can be a beneficial thing, but on the flip side can also be a negative thing. And so it's important that we think through a good balance, and we need more research that helps us to understand this more and helps us understand how we can increase adherence to these types of activities and how we can help technology be employed better. So why is it important for you? So great, Jonathan, you've talked to me about technology. You've told me the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so why is it important to me? Why is it important for my patients and those I work with? Well, first of all, because you could become a billionaire, and money, I think, talks, but really the idea, and there's a lot of research looking at the idea of creating the physical activity pill. So the pill that you would take that would give you all the benefits of physical activity, how amazing that would be. And if you were able to create this, you would become a billionaire, and it would probably arguably become the widest drug prescribed in the entire world. I don't know how often or how many of you have gone into your doctor's office and been told that you need to exercise more or become more physically active. And that's because we know that physical activity can really help so many aspects of our lives. And I've been so fortunate to be given this platform, these 30 to 40 minutes to talk about this. And I'm going to try not to step on my soapbox too much about physical activity because it's only a portion of what I want to talk about today. But you can see here, this is just a sample of the incredible benefits that we can achieve through exercise and by living a physically active lifestyle. And so you can see here that these are types of exercise effects that you can achieve by getting at least 150, but less than 2,000 minutes of exercise per week. And that can be aerobic or resistance type of exercise. So really any type of exercise, we can see lots of different benefits. And I'm going to focus on a few, if you'll allow me to get a little bit physiological with you, to think through these benefits of physical activity and why it's important to increase our levels of physical activity and how we can use technology to do so. And we'll come back to this slide or take a picture of it mentally, if you will, because we will come back to it when we talk a little bit physiologically. But just highlighting a few things here, and I've got some research that I'll present. But if we look at it, the idea of VO2 max, maybe you don't know what VO2 max is. So VO2 max is the amount of oxygen. It's a measure of the amount of oxygen that your body uses or is able to efficiently use while you're exercising at the maximal capacity that you personally can exercise at. And so this is a measure, like I said, that we can use for things like functional capacity and to gauge the level of health of an individual, and actually even mortality as well. My personal favorites from a metabolic perspective, we can look at different things of glucose uptake in the muscles, and we know if our muscles are using glucose, that's really a good thing, and that they're taking the glucose out of our bodies, out of our blood, which is generally a good thing. Obviously, in individuals with type 1 diabetes, something to manage, but nonetheless, these are benefits. When we look at insulin secretion when we exercise, there's changes in these metabolic hormones between insulin and glucagon. And from the perspective of bone, we know that osteoporosis, your risk of osteoporosis decreases as you're more physically active. And so there's a lot of physiological benefits that come from exercise. And as you can tell, something that I'm very, very passionate about. And so when we look at the recommendations, and I'll talk about this in a few slides, the recommendations of physical activity, we know that they hover right around 150 to 300 minutes per week that we should get in order to obtain these types of benefits. So with that, and thinking through the idea of physical activity, and of course, this idea of aging, we all know that our birthdays come every year, and every year we get a little bit older and a little bit wiser, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we become unhealthier. And I really want you to think and remember that and really drill that into your brain, because age does not dictate the level of your health. And it is so vitally important that we understand that, and that patients that we work with understand that, because if we can help individuals understand that, then we can know that they can look like my man Charles Euster here, who was an 87-year-old bodybuilder, 97-year-old, very, very large proponent of being healthy, and was able to be healthy up until he passed away in 2017. Or there is the thought that this is what aging could look like for some individuals. And that is the reality for some individuals. I don't want to be insensitive by showing this picture, but certainly I think that most of us would say, if I were to say, who would you rather look like? I think that most of us would probably say this individual on the left seems like they've got a higher quality of life than this individual on the right. And so it's important that we think through that. And I'm going to talk about some research that helps us show, and hopefully I can convince you, that even though you might be getting a year older as time goes by, that doesn't mean that your health is going to decline. So let's, for example, I want to take a second, because I think that it's really important when we talk about this idea of aging. And I love that we're celebrating Embrace Aging. I think that's a really important word, that embrace, because it's something that we need to embrace, and the attitude towards aging needs to change, and we need to check our own perspectives and our own biases to change that. And so I want to watch a video quick that I think really helps to show what I'm trying to get at here with this idea of exercise and technology and aging. So before we watch the video, if you have a pen and paper, if you've been keeping track of my thought moments here, I'll encourage you to write down for yourself, what are your perceptions of aging? So, and be honest with yourself. So if you think about, okay, my birthday's coming up, I'm going to turn 55. What is your knee-jerk reaction? What does that mean? What emotion does that evoke to you personally? And similarly, you could do this with people or patients that you work with. Does it invoke feelings of, oh, that means I'm going to be getting more wrinkles? Oh man, that means that my time of my 10K is going to decrease. Or, oh gee, I'm not looking forward to aging, because that means that I'm going to have to watch what I eat. My metabolism is going to slow down. What does that mean for you? What are your perceptions? So think that, lock that in your brain. We're going to watch a short video that's going to take aim at that and really help you think this through. So let's see. Can you tell me, can you hear that, Ali? I think you're the only person that I can hear a response for. Can you hear the video? Can you hear that? I don't want to play it if it's not
hearing any audio right now.
No? Okay, let me see here. I'm going to try to wait, Jaquetta, let me try again.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, hold on. Ah, jumped way back. Nothing?
No, oddly,
Okay.
there isn't.
I'm going to stop sharing for a second, and then I'm going to try again. bear with me here, everybody. I should have been more on the ball here. So I'm going to say this one, and I'm going to share my sound. That's what I forgot to do. Okay, now we should be good. Oops. Sorry, my navigation bar is getting in the way. Okay, here we go.
Hey, how's it going?
Better?
You can stand right there. That's your
Yes.
mark. How you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
Great.
Awesome.
Just tell us your first name and your age.
My real age?
My name is Paolo. I'm 25 years old.
My name is Daniela, and I'm 19.
24.
35.
31. 33.
I'm 26 years old.
What age do you consider to be old?
Late 40s.
Maybe 50.
I feel like 30 is a new 20, so I'd say like 40 is old.
I'd probably say 50s.
I'd like you to show me how an old person would cross the street. Show me how an old person would send a text message. How might an old person do a push-up? What about jumping jacks? Okay, hang on. There's someone I want you to meet.
Hello, I'm Birch. I'm 66.
Hi, I'm Daphne, and I'm 68.
I'm Dee, and I'm 55.
George Fassbinder, 75.
My name is Parvati. I'm 70.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
We're gonna give you about 2 minutes to teach each other something that you are good at.
I can teach you a jump that I do.
Okay, please.
Both of your legs go up, and your arm goes up, and your left arm goes like to the side. Ready?
Okay.
1, 2, 3. Lift 1, 2, 3. And bring it to your heart. And bring it to your heart. Add the head in. Yeah.
You want to try to get your balance and raise up. Now, you can bring your legs and your feet up. It's hard, right?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. So when you come out of the turn, either way, you go back to that basics.
Over. Now forward. Over. Yeah.
Square it like this, and give me a hook. Hook. Jab, cross, hook, and then we'll go like this, all right?
1, 2, 3.
Now, what age might you consider to be old?
Probably 80 or 90. He could just do everything that I told him to do.
An age that I would consider to be old now might be 100.
Do you remember what you said?
Yeah, I said in the 50s. I thought that would be old. But what I thought about it, like...
Wait a minute.
I'm sorry.
I can do it. It really changed my thinking of what old is.
You've taught me something today. Clearly, there's no way she's old, you know?
Now I know from today, hey, I don't look at age.
At my age, I feel like I did when I was in my 20s.
There's so many things that I still want to do. There's so many things that I can do. As long as I'm growing and learning, then age doesn't matter.
When people start stopping, that's when they start getting old.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Daphne.
It was great meeting you.
How long have you been doing this? Is this a new skill?
40 years.
Wow.
Awesome. Okay. So I think that it's, as you can see, really, really important and makes us think, what is aging and what does it mean to be old? And I think that really shows, for the perspectives of the talk today, that aging is really what we make of it. And that as we understand that, and as we are continue to be physically active, we can do the things in our 80s that we could have done in our 20s. And if we understand that and help others understand that, we'll continue to lead a healthy lifestyle. So let me, for example, or for a moment, bear with me as we talk about a little bit of physiology with this idea of a physically active lifestyle, and then we'll go into a little bit of the technology side of things again. So I mentioned a little bit of VO2 max, this idea of functional capacity, or the amount that your body of oxygen your body can use maximally. And what this graph wants to show from a research study that was done is basically that the more trained, or if you are trained, I guess, this is endurance trained up here. So that's individuals who are doing aerobic exercise. The idea of the VO2 max and functional capacity certainly decreases in both sedentary and endurance trained athletes over the years. And that's normal. We know that happens. But those who were endurance trained or who were active, their VO2 max decreased a lot less, as you can see here. It started a lot higher, but they ended as they aged, they ended a lot higher, which again, we know that VO2 max is a good predictor of mortality. And so if we can keep that oxygen consumption at maximal capacity higher, we will be able to, it will help us live longer. So if we look at this in a different perspective, again, this is a study done in about 6,000 men. They followed them for 6 years, and they had individuals living with cardiovascular disease, and they adjusted for age. And as you can see here, the risk of death decreased the more exercise that the individuals did. And so these METs, for those of you who don't know what METs are, that stands for metabolic equivalent, and that's just a unit that we use to measure the intensity of exercise and the amount of exercise. So again, you can see that as we are in higher core quintiles of exercise based on this study, the risk of death is decreased. Okay, and that's similar in subjects with cardiovascular disease as well. And that was regardless of, like I said, adjusting for age and medications as well, they did in this study. So then when we think about the idea of a muscular strength in age, and this particular study that talked about sarcopenia, so of course sarcopenia is that the loss of muscle, you can see that if we are able to have a higher threshold of muscular strength throughout our years, that will help us to lessen the loss of muscle that we see here. Okay, so if you look at this higher line, these are individuals who started higher in their younger years and were able to continue that strength and strength training, and were on the upper end of the range of strength. And as you can see here, this threshold of low physical performance, that's when the quality of life is affected in individuals. Okay, and then as you drop below, you have the threshold of disability, which is the inability to walk and perform other activities of daily living. Okay, and so this just really helps to show the idea that that we can maintain that strength, and that we through exercise and a properly designed physical activity program can really maintain our health and our ability to live a joyful, happy life. So this study looked at the resistance training, as I saw, and it showed that you can still gain muscle mass even if you are 90 to 96 years of age, which is a really cool thing. Often if we examine maybe our biases or our perceptions of aging, we think, oh, well, I'm getting older, so I'm going to lose all my muscle. I can't gain any more muscle. Well, that's very false. And this is an example of a study that shows that. This study, I want to highlight just again the idea of moderate to vigorous physical activity. So this is regardless whether it's strength training, whether it's aerobic training, so biking or walking or high intensity interval training. There's this spot right here, and this is where the recommendation comes from that we see from the Canadian government as well as American government, lots of governments across the world. Is 150 to 300 minutes. And that, as you can see, the more that you get, there's a sharp decline in these first kind of 10 MET hours per week. Again, METs are metabolic equivalent. So measure that we use when we look at physical activity. And there's steep decline in the risk of the mortality, the hazard ratio for mortality that decreases. And then we do see a tapering off here. So greater than about 16 METs per hour, MET hours per week, sorry, we do see a tapering off of those benefits. So again, this helps us to show that if we are in, or if we're able to get patients in that 10 to 15 MET hours per week, the ratio of mortality hazard ratio is substantially greater. So just as I mentioned, there are recommendations, and I think most of us might be aware of these, especially if you're a healthcare practitioner, of what we should be getting in terms of physical activity. So 150 minutes is kind of that bar, that benchmark that we aim for, that we know that a lot of people aren't getting. And a lot of people struggle. I know I myself struggle to get out some days to be physically active. And so what can we do? I'm presenting all of this fantastic evidence, and you think, gosh, Jonathan, this is great. I need to be more physically active. I need to exercise. But actually putting that into practice is a different story. And so that's where we've set out in terms of this research project that I've been working on to find these solutions to try and help individuals become more physically active. And that's my PhD project, and as Ali mentioned, that's funded by the CIHR and MRC, that's commonly, and we affectionately refer to it as Motivate. And it's a randomized control trial that we're conducting to see the feasibility of an exercise intervention to enhance exercise habits and physical activity adherence. And we're specifically focusing in Canada on individuals with type 2 diabetes, but this brand of Motivate has been expanded to look at other different clinical populations as well. So like I said, we wanted to solve a problem. That problem was that individuals are not as active as they should be. And individuals with type 2 diabetes are fairly sedentary. And so the resources to try and take aim at that, when we look at exercise interventions, we know that one-on-one exercise counseling and one-on-one exercise sessions really help individuals to become more physically active, because they're accountable. There's an individual there that's helping a person through that routine. But that's not necessarily feasible. Again, when you think about the title of the talk, being able to be physically active anywhere, that's not necessarily the case. And when we think of Canada, and the rural communities that we try to serve and help, that idea of one-to-one in a gym is not feasible. And so we came up with this idea of Motivate T2D, which aimed at giving individuals, and I'll come back to these slides, giving individuals fitness technology. So our mHealth, our intervention group, received a watch and a heart rate strap. And this enabled me, as the exercise specialist, to program their workouts and send their workouts electronically or via the internet right to their watch. And then their watch became kind of their exercise coach that would coach them through and give them haptic feedback and vibrate and beep at them to help them stay in the right heart rate zones that I had prescribed for them. And this the person could do at any place that they wanted. We had participants who enrolled in the study, and they were maybe based out of Newfoundland, but then traveled over to Jerusalem to visit family, and they were still able to continue with this program despite the distance and despite the change in their lifestyle. And so we recruited 120 individuals, so 60 from Canada. I'm sorry, I'm giving you nausea with my slides here. So we recruited 60 individuals from Canada and 60 individuals from the UK, and I'll show at the end where they all came from, but they came from anywhere from the Northern Peninsula and Newfoundland all the way to the west coast of Vancouver Island. And we really wanted to see if we implemented these measures that I showed you with individuals conducting their exercise from a watch with me based in Kelowna, prescribing exercise. Is this even feasible in our population? And so in individuals with type 2 diabetes who are aged 40 years old to 75. And so we also had individuals complete health tests. So at the beginning of the program, after 6 months of the program, and then after 12 months of the program, we had them complete these health checks, which included blood sampling, blood pressure monitoring, different body composition metrics, as well as glucose monitoring. And we wanted to see, these are secondary outcomes, we wanted to see if there was any changes in the physiology of these individuals as they completed this outcome. Again, from across all different Canada, all different areas of Canada. These are the health checks that we did as I outlined. Additionally, we leveraged this idea of Zoom to be able to contact these individuals from across Canada through different exercise consultations. So these, for each individual, it was a tailored program. And so they were able to meet with me, and then I would adjust their program accordingly to their wants, to their needs, and to whatever was going on in their life. And so we met 5 times throughout the program to help adjust the program as necessary. These individuals were also supported with feedback. So our intervention group that got the watch and the heart rate strap, I would text them daily, give them feedback, and then through the remaining months would text them weekly and then bi-weekly. And then our control group who just got the heart rate strap, so they didn't get the, they still got obviously the program. It was in a paper format, so it didn't come to their strap for the control group. They got weekly motivational text messages that were just kind of blanket template text messages. And so where are we now? Well, we are finishing data collection. We are wrapping it up in the next month here, which is really exciting. So we're going to have some fantastic results. Like I said, the primary outcome, looking at the feasibility, is this type of program even possible? And then looking at our secondary outcomes here. But just to kind of hit home the point of the reason I titled this talk of being physically active and leveraging technology, we were able to recruit individuals from, as you can see here, Newfoundland, majority from Ontario, a lot from British Columbia, almost every province. We did miss out, unfortunately, on Manitoba and a few of the maritime provinces. But we really got a good sampling. And as you can see here, again, when we think about the idea of the best gold standard for helping individuals adhere to a program is that one-on-one in a gym. This would not be feasible for an individual from traveling from Newfoundland over 10 hours to come for a one-on-one session, right? And so it really expands our reach, and we're really excited to see what comes of this, because hopefully we can show that regardless of location, we still have designed a program that can help individuals be physically active, to adhere to exercise interventions, and to increase their physical activity, to then consequently improve their health, as I've shown previously. When we think about aging and we think about the populations that need to exercise the most. So that brings me to the end of my presentation, and I appreciate your attention. I appreciate you listening to me. And here's my email address. If you're interested in getting in touch of anything I've talked about, I'm more than happy to talk about exercise and aging and technology. But I am happy to take any questions that you might have. I know I kind of went through some of the things fairly quickly. So if you do have any questions, I am more than happy to do my best to answer them.
Thank you, Jonathan. So please, people, audience, if you have questions, please type them in the comments box, or comments that you'd like to have Jonathan address. And while you're thinking of those, maybe I can start with a question. So my question, Jonathan, is how easy is it? You know, you talk about the project that you did, and we talk about technology. How easy was it for your participants to use the technology? on a regular basis? Did they find it easy and accessible? Because these watches can often be a little daunting in terms of all of the bells and whistles that they come with.
Yes, that's a very good question. And I think that for the most part, we had, again, this has been my baby for the past 2 years. So I think it's fantastic. I think we've done a really good job, but we've had participants who, we have one participant who is actually legally blind. And we've got participants who are very versed in the technology, and they had an Apple Watch ahead of time, and they totally understood. And I think for the most part, every participant in our intervention group has been able to adjust to the technology. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel like a helpline at some point in coaching individuals through the technology, but we were able to help individuals who were 75 years old, who had never used a watch, who'd never used an app before. We were able to coach them through downloading that and pairing their watch and syncing their watch. Certainly there was a very steep learning curve, but for the most part, we were able to be successful with every person who was enrolled in the trial. And when we look at withdrawal, there was nobody who withdrew from the program because they couldn't use the technology.
Excellent. So we have a really pertinent question, I think, from Richard Lowe. How does someone get started if they haven't made exercise part of their life? I think that's an interesting piece.
Yes,
to think about with those who you've worked with.
That would be my own father. Thanks, Dad, who asked that question. So I think that's a fantastic question, and I think that the biggest thing is to start small. I would not suggest going out and trying to run a marathon if you're feeling, maybe you felt motivated by my talk and you think I want to do better, and that's great. But I think that starting small and just small steps is really important. And one thing that we emphasize in this program, I guess I neglected to talk about the idea of behavior change and the techniques that we've kind of crafted into these exercise consultations. And I think that the biggest thing too is to not be too hard on yourself. So a lot of times we saw participants that would start and they'd say, hey, I want to do 3 times a week, and we'd adjust the program. And then there would be a lot of shame messages that participants would feel if they weren't able to achieve those 3 sessions in the week. And I think the big thing is to know that and understand and give yourself grace. So maybe I might be trying to get 3 times a week, but if I'm not able to do that, that's okay, because life happens. We get sick. We feel not very motivated. We have weeks where we eat more than we should. But the most important thing is to get back on that track eventually. And so I think that's the one piece of advice that I would say is to start, certainly, but to try and start slowly, and to be nice to yourself and to not be too hard on yourself. I could rattle off all sorts of different types of programs that there are, but there are a lot of programs out there that individuals can leverage in terms of getting help and starting.
So there was a good comment by Jaquetta that said she'd bought a smart trainer for her bicycle so she can ride safely in a virtual reality, which she really is enjoying. What about frustrations with tech? I love tech myself, but I often, the watch doesn't do what you want it to do, or the device that you're exercising on decides not to work properly. So how do we broach? I mean, you in a study, you're the virtual help desk, but how does somebody who's at home doesn't have you at hand? What tips or suggestions might you have for how they broach some of the frustrations and challenges you have in using tech to exercise?
I think that's a fantastic question, and I think because we live in an age where there are so many options, I think that there is an option that can work for most anybody. And you think, and I think about that in terms of the exposure that I've had to technology. And if there's not one specific device that's working for you, it's likely that there is another device that is. So for example, in our project, we use the Polar platform, which seemed to work fairly well. But there are many other devices, Fitbit, Garmin. There's a lot of Apple Watch, obviously, is a big player in the market. So I think that don't feel obligated to one specific brand or to one specific device, because there's one out there that can work and help with you. And also, as silly as this sounds, don't be afraid to call and get help. And I saw that that participants in our study who were more open about the struggles that they were having with the technology, it was a lot easier to help them. And so whether that's a younger individual or an older individual who feels comfortable with technology, similarly, it's never a bad thing to reach out and ask somebody for help, or to totally pivot and try something new with a new technology.
Yeah. So there's a good follow-up question from Tracy in that, I think, in that regard. Do the vendors and stores that sell the smartwatches offer training assistance? So I guess from your experience with Polar, if somebody was using the device, was it easy to access like the help desk from that company? Or you maybe have other experience with Garmin?
Yeah, I feel like all of these are good questions, and that's what my first response are. But I think that from our trial, we created a manual that we gave our participants, and most all of the stuff that we used, we took, again, from a Polar perspective, we took from their website. Now, every device is going to come with an owner's manual that certainly you can refer to. But I think that question really kind of helps to highlight that there is a decent lack in terms of assistance that you can access. And I think that from a Polar perspective, that all of our participants were able to call me. There was the owner's manual, but for trainings and things like that, I think that there is a lot that is lacking there. And I think about, again, we also used, as I mentioned, continuous glucose monitoring for our participants, and that itself was a new technology to a lot of them. They, again, came with an owner's manual. There was a number that they could call. Of course, they called me. I was able to coach them through. But I do think that really is a gap that needs to be filled from my perspective, that there isn't as much training as there should be. Okay.
So I've got a good question from Jordan. I've read that after a period of about 6 months, people start to lose interest with tech watches within exercise. Did you have difficulty with compliance in your study?
Yeah, and that is an up and coming area that we've seen kind of both sides of the picture. I'm not totally versed in the behavioral sciences, but I do know and have read a few papers that talk about that 6-month period with the retention. We certainly have seen a difference, and we certainly have seen that. So at the 6-month mark, individuals, because of the nature of how we had designed the trial, there was a little bit of attrition in the sense of the exercising sessions. And so certainly, and then at the 12-month mark, which is where we're at right now with the follow-up, we have seen a little bit of attrition. So I think that is a really good thing to think about for future trials, how we can continue to engage individuals in the tech from our perspective and motivate, but even just in general, trying to find that spot of gamification and engagement and trying to accountability too is an important piece.
I have a follow-up to that. Did you have any ideas as you saw maybe adherence or compliance to number of sessions dropping off? What although you were following obviously a strict trial protocol, what might you have done differently to try to re-engage people when they're sort of waning? And we were all a little bit like that. We start a new thing and we get kind of 3 months we're like still a little bit buoyed up, but 4 months we're finding it a little tedious now. And anything that came to your mind at the time that was common amongst the participants that you thought might have worked?
Yeah, I think that I guess paramount, what I would say is the way we had our exercise consultations laid out. The first bit, they were monthly, and then there was a taper of 3 months. And I think that I would redo that in terms of that accountability piece, because a lot of the participants came back and said that was really useful to know that they were going to be meeting with me, and to be able to adjust accordingly. And I think more than anything, as individuals, we like to get that validation. And so to have that validation from an exercise specialist to say, you know what, that's okay that you haven't been exercising. Let's go back to the drawing board and see what we can do. So I think that contact, I would have that contact more often with participants. Now, again, we were obviously looking at the feasibility. So from the feasibility of the participant, but also from the researcher side of things. And I think that would have been feasible with the number of participants we recruited for myself, but obviously in a larger trial, that would be something to consider in those meetings. And then I think additionally, and there's no research to back this, so take this as a grain of salt, but I also think that for the participants that were successful, I talked about giving yourselves grace. They were the ones that gave themselves grace. And so in any exercise trial or program, we try to build in periodization. So trying to help the individual progress, and then there's some recovery. But I would say almost giving an individual the okay to take 2 months off. Say, you know what, we're going to have these first 4 months, you're going to exercise, and then there's going to be a period where we're going to ask you, I don't want to say to not exercise, but we're going to ask you to, not as be compliant, and then we're going to pick you back up again to give that renewal, that sense of renewal, I would say.
Excellent. So not sure if there's any more questions from our audience. Any last burning issues that you'd like to talk about? So Peter says it also helps if you belong to a group as a social spectator, and I'm 80 and I belong to the Kelowna Running Club. And any comments about how you felt the group membership or group exercise works from the participants you work with too?
Yes, I echo that very strongly, Peter. We initially, when we built this protocol, there was the social element that was going to be built in. Unfortunately, I think it was 4 months in, Polar removed that social element to their platform, which by that time it was impossible for us to pivot and try and use a different platform or create our own. So the participants themselves didn't interact with each other. The idea was there was going to be that social element, but I can definitely speak to anecdotal evidence from the participants that those that were able to find social groups, to find clubs that they belong to, certainly adhered much better than those who were trying to go at it alone. So that's very, very true what you say there, Peter.
I think we always, exercising with a buddy is so important, right? When you don't feel like it, they feel like it, and they kind of drag you out for the run. Or if there's friends there, you don't want to let them down. So you're right, the social aspect.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. Younger members.
Carry on, Jonathan.
Oh, yeah, that's a great point. Younger members also help with technology. Yeah, so there's kind of a built-in social element to reach out if you do need help with syncing your watch and the amazing things. Now, and I could have, I didn't, because I didn't want it to sound like I was endorsing a specific brand, but I could have walked us through, what it looks like to get the most out of your Polar app. But that would be hard because everybody has different devices. But certainly, getting that connection with somebody who can show you, hey, do you know that if you log in and look at this is going to show you a suggested workout based on your heart rate variability, or this is where you can find the number of steps over the last 30 months that you've done. Those types of, again, self-quantification can really help to give that motivation at times where we might not be feeling it as much. So Yeah, metrics. You're right, I get that. They are, and they can be very motivating if you're a numbers person, utilizing your app. And I'm sure we're all on Strava. I'm actually not on Strava, but maybe some of us are. And you can use, there's that gamification, right? There's badges that you can earn and segments you can try and get, and it can be an intrinsically motivating type thing.
Excellent. Well, if there are no further questions, I'd like to thank you, Jonathan, for a great talk. That was really interesting, really helpful, and kind of really buoys us up and makes us want to exercise more. And as we exercise more, we want to exercise more. So there's all of that. And I think, Peter, you just commented there's participation. So I think, is that you mean there is participation? I think that's the Canadian site. So what I'd like to just do is wrap up. Thank everybody for attending, and thank you so much for the awesome questions. It's been really helpful to have a little bit of dialogue at the end of these webinars. And we'd love to encourage you to come to our other events scheduled for Embrace Aging Month in March. And wishing everybody a really happy rest of Thursday. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.